Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Grant Sanders pulled into his driveway and found chainsaws tearing through his hedge, he had no idea it would ignite a war. What began as a rogue HOA's overreach spiraled into forged documents, corrupt cops, and a courtroom battle that would shake an entire town to its core. It started like a bad joke. I pulled into my own driveway and found a chainsaw crew tearing up the hedge I'd planted just last fall. Not trimming, not maintaining, tearing. The whine of their saws cut through the air like nails across a chalkboard, and branches lay scattered across the gravel like the aftermath of a hurricane. My first instinct was that they had the wrong address. My second, this had HOA written all over it. I parked, jumped out, and approached the closest guy, a heavy-set man in a neon vest who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Hey, what the hell do you think you're doing?" I demanded, raising my voice over the roar of the machines. The guy didn't even blink. "Clearing for HOA line compliance," he grunted. "We've got orders to clear everything 10 feet from the drive. HOA perimeter cleanup." I stared at him, stunned. "What HOA? This isn't HOA land. This is my property. You're on private land. Where's your work order?" "Talk to the boss," he muttered, gesturing toward a black SUV idling by the roadside. And wouldn't you know it, out stepped her, Karen Tobin, HOA president of Timber Hill Pines, queen of smug entitlement, the woman I'd deliberately chosen to live away from when I bought this property a mile outside their community limits. She strolled over with a clipboard clutched like a Bible and a smile that could curdle milk. "Grant," she cooed like we were old friends. "I was wondering when you'd show up." I folded my arms. "Care to explain why your wrecking crew is dismantling my landscape?" She gave a theatrical sigh, flipping through her paperwork as if it meant something. "You've built on restricted buffer land, dear. This strip along the road, it's part of the Timber Hill Pines extended greenway. You're in violation of HOA perimeter ordinances. We've had this reviewed internally." "Internally?" I barked a laugh. "You mean you reviewed your own fantasy maps in your clubhouse over mimosas? This is my land. I own this parcel outright, every inch, including this hedgerow." Her eyes sparkled with condescension. "You may believe that, but there's a historical overlay agreement. The HOA has an easement claim dating back to 2006. You're simply a resident who hasn't yet aligned with our community standards." I stared at her, trying to determine if she was actually delusional or just power drunk. "Karen, I am not a member of your HOA. I never signed a damn thing. This property has nothing to do with Timber Hill Pines." She tilted her head with a pitying smirk. "Grant, you live within our spirit, even if not our paperwork. And as of last month's board vote, we're reasserting territorial integrity. That includes buffer zones like this." I nearly choked. "You're annexing my land? What is this, real estate NATO?" "I suggest you don't interfere with the work," she said sharply, suddenly done pretending. "We've authorized this through local code compliance." She turned on her heel and marched back toward the SUV. I snapped out of it and shouted after her, "You step 1 foot farther and I'm calling the sheriff." But she just waved over her shoulder. "Be my guest." So I did. I called Tuolumne County Dispatch and reported unlawful trespassing and property destruction. They promised to send deputies out. I waited and waited. Nearly 40 minutes later, a patrol car finally crawled up my drive. 2 officers stepped out, and my stomach dropped. Officer Jared Miller and Officer Ashley Tate. Not just familiar names, familiar faces. I'd seen them more than once lingering at HOA barbecues, always standing just a little too close to Karen at public meetings, her dogs with badges. "Afternoon, Mr. Sanders," Officer Miller said with a lazy smile. "We got a call about some dispute?" "Yeah," I said, pointing at the mess. "That crew, under her orders, came onto my property and started cutting down my hedge. No permits, no legal claim. They say it's HOA jurisdiction, but this land is mine. I have my deed in the house." Officer Tate exchanged a glance with Miller. "We've been informed by the HOA that this land is currently under administrative review due to boundary irregularities." I blinked. "That's not a thing." Miller shrugged. "Could be. We're not property surveyors." "Then maybe don't act like you're judges," I snapped. "I've got notarized documents that prove—" Miller cut me off with a chuckle. "Grant, you're a paper cowboy. All bark and bold fonts. If there's an issue, let the county sort it. Until then, I suggest you stay clear of any work crews. We don't want anyone getting hurt." "You're telling me to stay off my own land?" I asked slowly. Tate stepped forward. We're advising de-escalation. The HOA has legal counsel. If you interfere again, it could be construed as obstruction. I opened my mouth, then closed it. They weren't listening. They weren't here for justice. They were here for Karen. You've made your position clear, I said tightly. Now, make sure your report reflects mine. Miller smirked. Sure, Grant. Whatever helps you sleep tonight. They turned and left without even asking to see a single document. As they drove off, Karen emerged from her car again, arms folded, triumphant. See, sometimes it's just about knowing the right people. That night, I didn't sleep, but I sure as hell started planning. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of tires crunching gravel. I threw on a sweatshirt and stepped onto the porch just in time to see a white county-issued pickup truck backing into my driveway. Two men got out, both in pressed khaki uniforms, clipboards in hand. One of them, a wiry guy with sharp sunglasses and a self-important gait, gave me a nod like I was a waiter he didn't expect much from. "Mr. Sanders," he called. I nodded cautiously. "Yeah?" "We're here to serve a notice of administrative holding regarding your property." I stepped down a few stairs, heart already pounding. "Excuse me?" They approached and handed me a yellow envelope with county stamps and a glaring header, "Temporary property hold, pending municipal investigation." I flipped through it. No court seal, no judge's signature. Just a paragraph of vague legalese about jurisdictional ambiguity and a signature from Sergeant Joseph Venner, who, as I knew damn well, hadn't held a courtroom-verified position of any kind in his life. I looked back at the men. "You realize this has no legal standing, right? This isn't a court order, it's bureaucratic cosplay." The shorter one, clearly not thrilled to be there, mumbled, "We're just delivering, sir. You'll need to take it up with the county if you have objections." "I plan to." I snapped. And with my lawyer. As they pulled away, I called Kendra, my contact in the Tuolumne Land Records Office, and requested expedited certified copies of all property filings, title deeds, zoning maps, and land surveys related to Parcel 18B7070. Kendra, always the calm eye in a storm, promised I'd have them by end of day. I didn't even have time to sit before my phone buzzed again. Voicemail from the HOA's legal rep, informing me that a preliminary cease and desist notice had been filed against me for interfering with community maintenance operations. I didn't know whether to laugh or flip a table. But the real kicker came that afternoon. I drove to the Tuolumne County Clerk's office, demanding to see the incident report filed after the previous day's police visit. The clerk, a polite but overworked man named Doug, hesitated when I gave him my name. Yeah, we have a report. It says you were the one who initiated the request for HOA inspection access, and that you voluntarily agreed to restrict your access to the disputed area." My stomach dropped. "No," I said. "I filed no such request. I made a call about criminal trespassing." "That's it." Doug pulled up the report, frowning. "Well, the call log here shows a formal request submitted under your name, email, signature, and all." He turned the screen toward me. There it was. A document, time-stamped 2 hours after the police left yesterday, listing me as the petitioner for voluntary limitation of property access, pending boundary clarification. There was even a digital signature next to my name, one I'd never written. My hands curled into fists. I asked for a copy and took a picture of the screen. "I'm going to need the originating IP address of that request." Doug blinked. "You'd need a court order for that." "Don't worry," I said grimly. "That's already coming." Back home, I sat down at my kitchen table and laid everything out. The fake holding notice, the false incident report, the cease and desist, and now this forged digital request. It didn't take a genius to see the game being played. They were manufacturing a paper trail to make it look like I had consented to their presence, to weaken my position legally. I called Kendra again and asked if she could pull system metadata on property records access. Any access from outside terminals. She said she'd check with IT. Then I called someone I hadn't talked to in over 2 years, Clara Jennings, former colleague from my IRS days, now a legal bulldog in Sacramento with a specialty in federal land dispute litigation. When I told her what was happening, she didn't even hesitate. "They forged a county-level administrative request in your name?" "Yup." Jesus, Grant. That's not just civil. That's criminal, wire fraud, impersonation. Maybe even conspiracy if you can link it to municipal actors. You got backup? "I'm building it," I said. "You in?" "Always." We agreed to meet that Friday. In the meantime, Clara told me what to start gathering. device logs, service records, emails, timestamps, and, most critically, any connection between the HOA office network and the forged document's origin. By evening, Kendra texted, "Guess what? One of the access logs to your parcel file yesterday came from an IP address registered to Timber Hill Pines HOA Administrative Office. Want a screenshot?" I nearly dropped my phone from laughing. I replied, "Hell yes." Then I looked out the window toward the dark hedgerow that used to stand tall and proud along my drive. It was now reduced to shredded stumps and wood chips, a symbolic line crossed, and I wasn't letting it go unanswered. By Friday morning, my kitchen table looked like a crime scene, not of blood, but of paper. Certified deeds, satellite images, drone footage, printouts of IP logs, timestamps, property maps, and a neatly stapled copy of the forged request from me to restrict my own property access. I'd even printed the metadata header showing that the file originated from a network registered to Timber Hill Pines HOA. When Clara Jennings walked in, she didn't even take her coat off before dropping a thick leather case on the table and saying, "You weren't kidding." I nodded. I wish I was. She began sorting through the documents like a surgeon before an operation. This is enough to put pressure on 3 different institutions. We're starting with the HOA. I'm drafting a cease and desist for harassment, trespass, and document falsification. We'll file a formal complaint with the County Inspector General regarding police misconduct. Then we go federal. I raised an eyebrow. "That fast?" She smirked. "Grant, you've already got the hardest part, evidence. They're not just reckless, they're sloppy. That's our gift." We spent the rest of the day mapping out the response, step by step. Clara sent notice to the Tuolumne County Attorney's Office demanding they open an internal review of how a fake administrative order was filed under a citizen's name without verification. She also submitted a public integrity complaint against Officers Miller and Tate, accompanied by the footage from my drone and security cams, which clearly showed them refusing to review ownership documents while backing HOA actions on private land. That weekend, it got messier. Late Saturday night, my motion cameras caught headlights pulling into the gravel near my back fence. I checked the live feed, 2 silhouettes, flashlights in hand, pacing along the perimeter. One of them climbed onto a rock and started scanning my property with what looked like a rangefinder or some kind of optical scope. I didn't even hesitate. I hit the record button and called dispatch. This time, instead of Miller or Tate, a new deputy named Ramirez arrived. Young, serious, didn't waste time. I met him at the gate and showed him the recorded footage, grainy, but clear enough to make out a vehicle registered to the Timber Hill Pines HOA fleet. Ramirez shook his head. "I'll file this as unlawful surveillance. It's your right to press charges if they stepped onto your land." "They didn't," I admitted, "but they were a tow away." He nodded. "Even hovering like that may qualify as harassment. I'll note it. You got a good system here, Mr. Sanders." "You have no idea." Clara filed an amended complaint first thing Monday morning, now including attempted intimidation. But that wasn't the real punch. The real punch came from the footage I hadn't realized I had. The roadside camera at the end of my property. I'd installed it months earlier to monitor wildlife and delivery trucks. But on review, Clara and I spotted something damning. It showed Officer Tate pulling up to the HOA office 2 hours before the forged administrative request was logged in the system. She exited her cruiser, entered the building, and re-emerged 45 minutes later, holding a laptop and a file folder. We cross-referenced timestamps. The forged document was submitted 30 minutes after she left. We now had a sequence. 1. HOA documents an issue. 2. Officer Tate personally visits the HOA office. 3. A forged legal document appears under my name, electronically signed. 4. Officers use that document as justification to intimidate me and support trespassers. "This isn't just HOA gone wild," Clara said as she reviewed it again. "This is municipal collusion. We're filing a triple complaint, 1 with the county, 1 with the California AG's office, and 1 federal." That evening, I received a letter from a private legal firm hired by HOA, threatening litigation for interference in community operations, verbal harassment of work crews, and defamation. Clara didn't blink. "Perfect. That means they're scared." We included the threat in our filing. By Thursday, I received an official notice from the State Bar of California confirming that a formal investigation had been opened into the forged document and its use by 2 sworn officers, And then came the tipping point. Claire received a USB drive anonymously delivered to her firm. No label, no return address. On it, recordings, conversations inside the HOA's admin office, captured by someone on the inside. One clip stood out. Karen's voice, unmistakable. "I don't care what his papers say. He wants to play sheriff. Let's see how he feels when real cops put him out on his ass. Jared and Ashley are on board. I'll handle the rest." Clara looked at me after hearing it. She just dug her own grave. We weren't going to let her climb back out. The courthouse smelled like mildew and bureaucracy. I sat at the long wooden table beside Clara, listening as the judge read through the opening motions like she was skimming a boring menu. Across from us, the Timber Hill Pines legal team looked like they'd come straight from a country club boardroom. 3 gray-suited attorneys with smug grins and pristine haircuts. Karen was seated at the end of their table, arms crossed so tight her knuckles were white, jaw locked like she'd just swallowed a lemon. It was the preliminary hearing for our civil case, and I could already feel the tension crackling like a live wire. Clara had filed for immediate injunctive relief, a legal restraining order to block HOA or affiliated agents from stepping within 100 feet of my land. We were also suing for trespass, document fraud, abuse of process, and conspiracy. Karen's lawyers, on the other hand, were trying to argue this was a misunderstanding between parties that should be settled through mediation. The judge wasn't having it. "I've reviewed both filings," she said evenly, scanning the documents. "I see video evidence, digital metadata logs, timestamp discrepancies, and verified title deeds going back 15 years. Unless the defense has documentation of equal weight, this isn't going to arbitration." Clara stood up smoothly. "Your Honor, we'd also like to submit additional material, aerial footage from Mr. Sanders' drone, as well as newly obtained access logs from the Tuolumne County Clerk's Office. These logs show unauthorized access to restricted property files using a network registered to the Timber Hill Pines HOA. That's not a misunderstanding. That's intrusion." One of the HOA's lawyers stood up, clearly trying to salvage the moment. "We don't contest the origin of the access. However, our client believed she had implied jurisdiction based on a historical buffer zone agreement." "There is no such agreement," Clara snapped before the judge could respond. "That fiction exists only in HOA newsletters and Karen Tobin's imagination." The judge raised a brow, but said nothing. The HOA lawyer sat down. Karen, who'd been silently seething, suddenly leaned in and hissed something to her attorney. He tried to calm her, but she shoved his arm away, stood up, and pointed directly at me. "That land has always belonged to Timber Hill Pines," she barked. "His hedges were on our greenway. I don't care what signatures he has. That property was meant for community use." Clara didn't flinch. "Your Honor, may we request that Ms. Tobin refrain from courtroom outbursts?" The judge looked unimpressed. "Ms. Tobin, you are not currently under oath. If you'd like to be, I can arrange that very quickly. Sit down." Karen sat. Then came the moment Clara had been waiting for. "Your Honor," she said, producing a printed frame from the roadside surveillance video. "This is Officer Ashley Tate, entering the Timber Hill Pines HOA office with a laptop and a sealed folder." 30 minutes after this moment, a forged administrative complaint bearing my client's digital signature was uploaded into the county clerk's system. The judge leaned forward. "Are you alleging collusion between a sworn officer and the HOA?" "No, Your Honor," Clara said, her voice steady as stone. "We're proving it." She handed over a second image, a metadata report tracing the document's upload origin to an IP block assigned to the HOA's network. "We weren't just suggesting wrongdoing anymore. We were laying it out, one irrefutable piece at a time." That's when the opposing side blinked. The lead HOA lawyer stood up and requested a recess to review new evidence. The judge granted 15 minutes. During the break, I watched them huddle around Karen, whispering furiously. She wasn't whispering back. She was snarling, waving her arms. At one point, she actually pointed at one of her own attorneys and called him a coward, loud enough for nearby observers to turn their heads. Clara leaned toward me. "She's going to self-destruct." "She already is." When we returned, the HOA lawyer spoke again, this time with far less confidence. "Your Honor, in light of newly submitted evidence, we would like to delay further proceedings until we can evaluate the integrity of certain procedural documents submitted on our client's behalf." The judge shook her head. "That won't be necessary. Injunction is granted. No HOA agent, employee, contractor, or officer shall approach Mr. Sanders's property for any reason without a court-issued warrant. Furthermore, I'm referring this case to the Tuolumne County DA's office for criminal review." Karen's mouth actually fell open. Her lawyer tried to whisper something, but she shoved her chair back and stood again. "You're going to regret this," she said. "I've got people in this town. You think this ends here?" The judge didn't even look up. "Bailiff, remove her." That was the first time I saw Karen escorted out by a uniformed deputy, and I had a feeling it wouldn't be the last. I woke up the next morning to find a black envelope duct taped to my gate. There was no postage, no return address, just a sheet of matte paper inside with red font, reading, "You want war? You got it." Taped beneath it was a printed photo of my front porch, taken at night with my dog sleeping on the steps. The message wasn't subtle. It also wasn't smart. I already had motion detection cameras running 24/7. I pulled the SD card and scrubbed the footage. Two figures, hoods up, no masks, walked right up to the gate at 2:46 a.m. One of them, I recognized the walk. It was the same guy I'd seen in Timber Hill Pines a few weeks ago. One of their board members, a guy named Murray Diaz, HOA treasurer, terrible at being sneaky. I texted the images to Clara. Within 10 minutes, she replied, adding witness intimidation to the civil complaint. Also forwarding this to DA's office. Keep your cameras rolling. That same day, we got word from the Tuolumne County District Attorney's Office. They were opening a formal criminal investigation into Timber Hill Pines HOA and its leadership, as well as internal review proceedings against Officers Tate and Miller. Clara's contact in the AG's office flagged something bigger. Apparently, this wasn't the first time Timber Hill Pines had pulled stunts like this. An elderly couple back in 2017 had tried to file a claim after a forced greenway realignment, and their house was later vandalized. Their case had been dismissed due to lack of evidence. Only now the DA was interested in reopening that case, and they wanted my footage, documents, and drone data as part of a pattern of abuse. Things were unraveling for them faster than I expected. Then came the subpoenas. First, a warrant was issued for the server logs of Timber Hill Pines HOA. The HOA's attorney tried to stall, but the judge fast-tracked it, citing clear and immediate public interest. Second, Officer Tate was officially suspended without pay, and Miller followed the next morning. Third, and most satisfying, the county clerk's office filed a sworn affidavit admitting the forged digital complaint that appeared under my name had been inserted outside official workflow. That's bureaucrat speak for somebody hacked it in. I took that as a win. But HOA, they weren't done. Late Wednesday night, another work crew showed up. No marked vehicles, no uniforms. Just 4 guys in hoodies and gloves trying to dig a trench near the southern tree line. They didn't get far. I hit the floodlights and loudspeakers, full blast, then walked out with my phone recording and the drone hovering overhead. The crew froze. One guy tried to say, "We're just fixing drainage." "On my land," I said, shining the flashlight straight in his face. He bolted. I called the sheriff's office, this time bypassing the local station and going straight to the state police liaison, thanks to Clara's push. They responded within 20 minutes. The crew was gone by then, but we had footage, plates, timestamps. One of the trucks, registered to a contractor used almost exclusively by Timber Hill Pines HOA. The next morning, a reporter from the Tuolumne Sentinel showed up at my gate. I wasn't planning to talk to media, but the guy had done his homework. He'd found 3 other property owners within 10 miles of Timber Hill Pines who'd experienced quiet encroachments from the HOA over the past decade. "Would you be willing to go on record?" he asked. Clara said yes before I could answer. That weekend, the headline hit. Private citizen fights back after HOA annexation attempt. Evidence points to years of abuse. Karen didn't make a statement, but Timber Hill Pines issued a denial of wrongdoing press release, so full of spin it practically circled the globe. They called me a combative landowner with a history of refusing cooperative development efforts. Cooperative? I nearly spit my coffee. But the quote that made me laugh the hardest? "Mr. Sanders' allegations are inflammatory and lack context." Yeah, because your context was breaking into private land and forging documents. Meanwhile, Claire and I weren't just sitting on our hands. We'd obtained aerial images from state mapping archives proving the contested property lines had never once been part of Timber Hill Pines, not even back in the 1970s when the original roads were laid. Then we got a call from an anonymous HOA board member. He didn't give his name, just said he was done. "I got roped in by Karen years ago," he said, "but this is too far. I've seen the emails. She told the officers they'd be taken care of if they made this go away. And Murray, he filed the complaint against you pretending to be a concerned neighbor. We all knew it was fake. She told us to back her play or resign." "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because someone's going to jail," he said, "and I'm not going with them." We got his statement notarized the next day. The walls were crumbling. By the time we walked into the courthouse for the full civil trial, the place was buzzing. The gallery was packed. Journalists, community members, even a few Timber Hill Pines residents who looked like they were attending a public execution but weren't sure whose it would be. Karen sat stiffly at the defense table, lips pursed, clutching her binder like a life raft. Her legal team had thinned out. 2 of the original 3 lawyers had withdrawn after the subpoenaed server logs revealed damning internal emails. The one who remained looked like a man trying to plug a dozen holes in a sinking ship with chewed gum and good posture. Clara and I were calm, focused. She was dressed in her signature navy suit and red heels, her game day uniform, and I'd swapped out my usual flannel for something a little more courthouse appropriate. Still not a tie, but at least not denim. The judge called us to order. Opening statements began, and the defense clung to the same narrative they'd been gasping toward since day one, that this was all a procedural misunderstanding, that the HOA was acting in good faith, and that my property was ambiguously situated along an evolving jurisdictional boundary. It was almost impressive, the level of euphemism they managed to cram into a single sentence. Then Clara stood. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, pacing slowly in front of the jury, "this is not a story about confusion. This is a story about control. About an HOA that decided on its own that it could redraw boundaries, override public records, manipulate law enforcement, and erase a man's ownership rights because they felt entitled to do so. This isn't a mistake. It's a scheme." We started with the land deed, plain, notarized, certified, and uncontested for over a decade. Then came the drone footage showing the illegal clearing crew. Then the metadata logs tying the forged digital request to the HOA network. Then the anonymous board member's notarized affidavit, read aloud, describing exactly how Karen instructed them to create a paper trail to discredit Grant Sanders. Next came the road camera footage, Officer Tate walking into the HOA office. Then, the fake document appearing in the county system 30 minutes later. That sequence landed like a hammer. But the final blow was the audio file from the anonymous source. Karen's voice, unmistakable, caught on tape saying, "I don't care what his papers say. The cops will remove him. Just give them something they can pretend is legal." The courtroom went still. Karen's attorney asked for a recess. The judge denied it. Then it was the defense's turn, and they had nothing. They tried to claim the audio was inauthentic. Clara responded by calling in a forensics expert who confirmed the recording's integrity and source. They claimed the forged document was submitted by a rogue volunteer. Clara pointed out it was tied directly to Murray Diaz's admin login and that his HOA treasure account had submitted other records just minutes apart. They tried, laughably, to say that Karen was acting in the best interest of the community. That's when Clara introduced the photos from the late-night surveillance, the intimidation tactics, and the fake notice duct taped to my gate. When Karen finally took the stand, she tried to play it cold, measured, but within 5 minutes of cross-examination, the cracks showed. Clara asked about the forged documents. "I was informed they were standard," Karen replied. Clara smiled. "By whom?" "I don't recall." "Was it Officer Tate?" Karen hesitated. "Ms. Tobin," Clara said calmly, "please remember you're under oath." That was it. The hesitation, the moment of silence. The jury saw it too. The final day of trial, I took the stand. I told them what it felt like to walk out your front door and find your hedges being demolished. What it's like when the police, the ones who are supposed to serve and protect, laugh in your face while waving a fake order. How it feels when someone tapes a threat to your gate at 2 in the morning. I didn't need to embellish. The truth was already louder than fiction. Clara finished with a simple question. "Mr. Sanders, why did you pursue this case despite all the risks?" I looked straight at the jury. "Because if people like Karen can get away with this, then property rights mean nothing, and I don't believe in backing down from bullies." When I stepped down, there wasn't a sound in the courtroom. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Then they returned. Verdict: guilty on all counts of trespass, conspiracy, document fraud, harassment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Awarded damages, $2.4 million including punitive damages. But it wasn't over. The judge, clearly incensed, referred Karen Tobin, Officer Tate, and Officer Miller for criminal prosecution. As Karen was escorted out, again she shouted, "This is all political, you'll see," but nobody was listening. They called it the trial that broke the pines. Within 48 hours of the verdict, the news exploded across local channels. HOA president found guilty of land fraud, read one headline. Another called it a landmark win for private property owners. But the story didn't stop at headlines. What followed was a judicial demolition of everything Timber Hill Pines had built behind their iron gates and manicured hedges. The Tuolumne County District Attorney's Office moved fast. With the court's criminal referral in hand and enough evidence to drown in, they filed charges against Karen Tobin, Officer Ashley Tate, and Officer Jared Miller. The charges were no slap on the wrist. Karen was indicted for conspiracy to commit fraud, document falsification, criminal trespass, witness intimidation, attempted coercion of law enforcement. Tate and Miller faced abuse of authority, filing false reports, unlawful enforcement, action tampering with public records. Their arrests were swift, all three taken into custody within a week. Karen was picked up at the Timber Hill Pines office in broad daylight, her wrists cuffed behind her back as a dozen residents stared in stunned silence. She screamed about unlawful persecution the whole way to the cruiser. Tate and Miller were booked just as publicly. Turns out Internal Affairs had been building a file on both for over a year. They just hadn't had enough to move. Our case cracked it wide open, but it didn't end there. The state of California's Civil Division launched an investigation into Timber Hill Pines HOA as an organization. Their audit uncovered a history of undocumented greenway expansions, dozens of informal fines that weren't properly recorded or legally enforceable, manipulated community meeting minutes, use of HOA funds to retain private security for off-books operations. The final blow came when the Secretary of State suspended the HOA's nonprofit status, pending litigation. In response, over 40 residents of Timber Hill Pines filed a class action lawsuit against their own HOA for misuse of funds, property harassment, and breach of fiduciary duty. The same people who once shrugged off Karen's power plays were now suing her legacy into oblivion. Meanwhile, I was at home, rebuilding. The trench by the southern tree line was reseeded and landscaped. The hedge line, the one they butchered, had been replaced with a stone wall. And at the gate, I installed a cast iron sign custom forged by a local welder. It read, "Private Property." Badges, titles, and HOA letterheads don't make you right. People started driving by to take pictures of it. A few neighbors even stopped to thank me. Some were from Timber Hill Pines themselves, embarrassed, apologetic. One man in his 70s brought me a pie and said, "You didn't just save your land, you saved ours." Clara, meanwhile, was being approached for interviews, speaking engagements, even a book deal. She turned most of them down. The work speaks for itself, she told me, but she did accept one offer, a consulting role on a statewide task force examining HOA abuse and overreach. As for me, I got a certified letter from the county recorder's office. Enclosed was an updated parcel map and legal declaration affirming full uncontested ownership of my land, including the once disputed road, tree line, and all easements. A victory inked into law, but the moment that stuck with me most wasn't legal. It was emotional. Standing in the back of the courtroom on sentencing day, I watched Karen shuffle in, wearing an orange jumpsuit, wrists shackled, flanked by 2 bailiffs. She looked tired, smaller than before, defeated. The judge asked her if she had anything to say before sentencing. She stood up and stared at the gallery. "I only did what I thought was best for the community," she muttered. The judge replied without even looking up from his notes, "You thought wrong." Karen Tobin was sentenced to 15 years in state prison. Tate and Miller each received 10 years with no possibility of early release due to the abuse of authority enhancements. As they were led out of the courtroom, I didn't smile. Not then. But when the judge turned to me and asked if I had a final statement, I nodded and stepped forward. You laughed at my documents. You called me paranoid. You tried to bully me off my own land. Today, you're in handcuffs. And I'm still standing. I looked over at the jury box, then to the people in the seats behind me, then at the officers leading Karen away. That's the difference between power and the law. And I walked out into the California sun. The last thing I expected, a year after it all started, was to get a letter from the governor's office. Not a subpoena, not a complaint. A letter, embossed, formal, and respectful, thanking me for defending individual property rights and setting a precedent for landowner justice in California. It even came with a plaque. I didn't put it up, but Clara did, hung it dead center in her office behind her desk. She said it made clients trust her faster. I didn't argue. My life on the surface returned to something close to normal. I woke up early, drank my coffee on the porch, worked in the shop behind the house, went days at a time without thinking about Karen, the HOA, or their doomed little empire. But now, people knew my name. Local property owners reached out for advice. Journalists asked me to comment on new bills. One guy, some minor senator's assistant, pitched the idea of me running for the county board. I turned him down. I don't need a podium to know what's mine, but I didn't shut the door completely. I started attending zoning board meetings, quietly, not as a crusader, just a man with eyes open now. As for Timber Hill Pines, they don't exist anymore. After the verdicts, the HOA was dissolved by court order. The assets, including Karen's SUV, several community bank accounts, and even her beloved President's Garden, were liquidated and distributed as part of the class action settlement. The land once marked as a greenway buffer was officially re-registered as unincorporated private lots. Some residents moved out. Most stayed, now free from Karen's reign. One of them, a guy named Tom Keller, even invited me to their new Welcome Back block party. No bylaws, no citations, just potluck dishes and lawn chairs. I went, ate ribs, watched a retired firefighter teach kids how to roast marshmallows without setting their eyebrows on fire. It felt like peace. And Karen, she's sitting in the women's facility at Chowchilla, serving 15 years. The last I heard, she filed an appeal claiming she was targeted by a political conspiracy. It was denied in under an hour. Tate and Miller are in the men's unit near Corcoran. Rumor has it, they were offered plea deals if they testified against Karen during the trial, but refused, thinking it would never go that far. Turns out blind loyalty doesn't count for much in sentencing court. Clara? She's now running her own legal firm full-time, focusing on HOA abuse cases. She named it Redline Law. I thought it was a bit dramatic until she pointed out that for most people, property lines are life and death. She still calls every now and then, usually after she's won something big. Just another HOA president in the dumpster grant, she'll say, and we'll laugh like it's a drinking game. And me? I wake up to silence. No fake notices on the gate. No threats duct taped to the mailbox. No strangers in orange vests with clipboards acting like they own the soil under my boots. Just trees, wind, the deep, quiet hum of a life put back where it belongs. And that sign by my gate, the cast iron one I installed after everything, still stands tall. Private property, badges, titles, and HOA letterheads don't make you right. Sometimes when I walk past it, I stop and look at it for a second longer than necessary. Not because I need the reminder, but because I earned it.